everyone, welcome to Manifest IAS. You're watching Current Dots. This is Manjunath, Polity Faculty at Manifest. Current Dots is a current affairs initiative which we started on April 1st, and as part of this initiative, we'll be covering all important current events that have transpired since June last year. We're also giving free PDFs of these videos for download. The links for the PDFs are posted in the comment and description section. And also for the time stamping of all these videos, please see the description. This is internal security part which we are dealing with, and as part of internal security, we have already released 3 videos. This is the 4th one. In my last video, I had started with certain internal security issues. That is the first issue which I had done, it was terrorism. This is the second issue, economic offenses. In your syllabus, money laundering has been mentioned, but broadly economic offense is a big topic which should be linked with your idea of security, which I discussed in my first video, wherein I had said that security is no longer the traditional concept or a conventional idea of military and law and order only. It also has many dimensions or facets attached to it. One of the facets is financial or economic security. So we'll look at some economic offenses and some initiatives taken by the government in recent times to provide economic security and financial security. So let us look at the subtopics. The first act which we are going to discuss is Fugitive Economic Offenders Act. This is a new act. This aims to strengthen the Money Laundering Act. Second is some amendments have been made to the Money Laundering Act originally passed in 2002 that we'll be looking into. And there is an institutional mechanism. And if you remember when I discussed security in my first lecture, I had very precisely mentioned that there is a security architecture working in India. The security architecture in my first and second videos we have discussed with respect to Ministry of Defense and Ministry of Home Affairs. So similar to that structure, there is a separate structure for financial security. There is a financial security architecture in India. Some institutions of that under that architecture are Enforcement Directorate, Financial Intelligence Unit, Economic Intelligence Council, and at the international level there is one institution which is in use, that is Interpol. Starting with the topics, the first one is Fugitive Economic Offenders.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Now this bill became a necessity. There is a certain background or history for this. There were certain economic offenders who were untamed by the Money Laundering Act. There was a necessity for a strengthened act. The Money Laundering Act had a certain drawback or a loophole. It could not bring extradition of people who were economic offenders and who had gone fugitive, that is, who had left India. So this was in the context of Vijay Malla, Mehul Choksi, etc. So as a result, there was a need to strengthen Money Laundering Act. So a separate act was passed, that is Fugitive Economic Offenders Act. Now, Fugitive Economic Offender is a special case of an offense under money laundering. So when I say it is a special case of an offense, there is a list of scheduled offenses given under Fugitive Economic Offenders. When that particular offense is committed and certain conditions are satisfied, then that individual can be declared as a fugitive offender. So when the person is declared a fugitive offender, what does it entail? So first we look at who is a fugitive economic offender. A person who has committed a scheduled offense, that is the offense which has been listed under the act. What does it say? The offenses should involve amounts of 100 crore or more. So any offense which is of amount 100 crore or more falls under the purview of the law. Along with this condition, there are 2 other conditions which need to be satisfied in order to be designated a fugitive economic offender. The person should have left the country to avoid facing prosecution. Second, he or she should have refused to return to face prosecution. Basically, he is creating hindrances to prosecution process. So these are the basic conditions the law gives you. Also, the bill says that central government can amend the schedule through notification. It can change or make amendments depending on the need of the circumstances. So this is the definition. What is the procedure to declare a fugitive economic offender? Who can declare it? It is not the executive nor the parliament. It is the judiciary which has the authority to declare it. So there are certain special codes for it. But remember, these special codes are not established particularly under this particular act. These are the same codes which have been established under money laundering. So a designated court under Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, those courts only will be acting to implement this particular law. So these special courts will declare or will give the decision of designating an individual as a fugitive economic offender. So there is a certain procedure also the court needs to follow. The court will give orders regarding it will ask the person, the individual, the concerned individual, to appear at a specified place at least 6 weeks from the issue of notice. So in case this does not follow, then the proceedings will the entire prosecution process will start. That is, he will be declared a fugitive economic offender. So 6 months time period is given once it is taken to the court. But after that, if the individual does not respond, then the proceedings under the act follow. So when I say proceedings under the act follow, what are the impacts or the effects? So the first impact which follows after declaring a fugitive economic offender is confiscation of property. That is, the property will be taken under the government of the individual who is declared a fugitive economic offender, that is resulting from the proceeds of the crime. So whatever property has been resulted from the proceeds of the crime, that will be confiscated. Not only this, confiscation of property belonging to the such offender in India and abroad, including Benami property. So any other property is also confiscated, because the same proceeds of the crime will be used to pay off the lenders as well. So third is, the person will lose any right to make civil claims. So this is the third impact of declaring a fugitive economic offender. And all cases under the proposed law will be tried under the PMLA Act only, and the administrator will be selling those fugitive properties to pay off the lenders once it is confiscated. So the proposed law will have an overriding effect over all other pieces of legislation. So what does this mean? So it is considered as a priority act. When you say priority act, what does it mean? Suppose there are 3 or 4 laws working in the same field or having similar provisions. Just take for example PMLA Act 2002. That act itself is working on money laundering. Fugitive Economic Offenders Act also is working in money laundering. In case there is a disharmony, in case there is an incongruity between the two acts, this particular act will prevail. Hence it is called a priority act. It has an overriding effect on any other law. So that is the meaning. So through this act, the extradition process, the confiscation process, etc., has been strengthened. Now there's one more issue which has been in news with respect to money laundering. The original Money Laundering Act, which was passed in 2002, was amended in 2012. It was also amended in 2015. So certain changes you should be knowing with respect to Money Laundering Act after 2014, that is after the present government. What are changes made to that particular act you should be knowing. So if you remember, I did mention that current does not today mean a current events that have transpired a year ago. Today the meaning has changed. It particularly means after the change in the regime, because there has been a dramatic shift in terms of policies of this government vis-a-vis the earlier governments. So Money Laundering Act, what are the provisions, what are the changes made? Just let us, in order to understand this act, I need to give you an observation with respect to money laundering. See, when money laundering happens, there is a crime which is consequently happening during that particular period of time. So out of an illegal, so there are two acts happening. One is you are committing an illegal activity, or you are involved in illegal activity, you're selling drugs, for instance. So that is one act. Second is you're getting money out of selling those drugs. That is the second act. So there are two illegal activities you're doing. So first act is selling drugs. Second act is the proceeds of the crime which you're getting, the money you're getting, that is being laundered. That is being, you launder it and you make it white. So these are the two independent crimes. Original act wouldn't provide or wouldn't give you a standpoint, or the government wouldn't get the authority, because there is no such offense, or the offense you cannot consider money laundering as an offense independently, because there is nothing of that sort mentioned in the act. So in order to strengthen this act, money laundering itself will now be treated as a standalone offense or a standalone crime. That is the major provision or the major amendment made in the Money Laundering Act. There are many other changes we'll look into one by one. So first it says that money laundering is now treated as a standalone offense, and money laundering till date was not treated as an independent crime. It depended on another crime known as the predicate offense. So there was an offense, it predicated upon that, so the proceeds of which are made the subject matter of crime as of today. It also expands the ambit of proceeds of crime. Now, the definition of proceeds of crime is also expanded. It now includes all those properties which may directly or indirectly be derived or obtained as a result of any criminal activity. So it expanded by including any kind of property directly or indirectly, even if it is indirectly or remotely connected with an illegal activity, that is also included under the definition of proceeds of crime. Third is, if in the original act there was no provision for so suppose a person has proceeds of crime, and if he actively collaborates with other person, or he actively tries hard to, or actively tries to conceal those proceeds of crime, that there was no provision in the act that to prosecute that particular offense, that is the act of hiding or concealment. So now under this act or under the amendment, what it says is even concealment of proceeds of crime, possessing, acquisition, use, projecting it as untainted money, all these will be treated as offenses. So these are the changes made, and most importantly, it has also changed the nature of offense. Under Money Laundering Act, originally it was not a cognizable offense. Now it is made cognizable and a non-bailable offense. So in case of inquiry, if Enforcement Directorate is doing the inquiry, it is empowered to arrest a person without a warrant, subject to certain condition, of course, and it is now a non-bailable offense. So it has completely removed two sections, section 16, 17 and section 18, where in those sections it was written that a warrant was necessary. Now it is completely removed. And there was one more change made. Section 72 will now give power to the center to set up an interministerial coordination committee. Now, in one thing which you have to remember with respect to security aspects is security cannot be managed well unless different ministries come together, because security is diffused, it is spread territorially, it is spread spatially as well. So interministerial coordination is very much necessary, particularly in offenses like money laundering. So there is a committee, it gives the authority to the center to set up an interministerial coordination committee for interdepartmental and interagency coordination. When I say this, what does it mean? Interministerial and interdepartmental, what does it refer to? ED cooperating with CBI, CBI cooperating with CBC. As the function under different ministries, you need a coordination committee where all ministries can collaborate and act effectively. So these are the changes. Next is institutional setup in order to deal with such issues, money laundering issues. Under Money Laundering Act, it is the Enforcement Directorate which is the nodal authority to prosecute or to investigate all such cases. So what is Enforcement Directorate, that you have to know. Originally, Enforcement Directorate was called Enforcement Unit. It was established in 1956. Later on in 1957, its name was changed to Enforcement Directorate or Directorate of Enforcement. It is placed under a department called Department of Revenue under Ministry of Finance. Now, what are its two major functions that you have to remember? It gets its power under two laws. One is Foreign Exchange Management Act. This was originally its function. Later on, when Money Laundering Act was passed in 2002, the authority or the responsibility to implement this particular act was given to Enforcement Directorate. Now you should be knowing this because Enforcement Directorate has been playing an active role these days, and its coordination with Interpol, its issue of red corner notice, etc., and all those things we'll be discussing. Next is Financial Intelligence Unit. So Enforcement Directorate is under PMLA. It's an investigative agency, but before investigation you should also be having an intelligence unit where you'll get the information. With respect to intelligence unit, one institution have discussed called Joint Intelligence Committee. That Joint Intelligence Committee is placed under Cabinet Secretariat. We had discussed this with respect to National Security Council, Strategic Policy Group, NSAB, and last body is the Intelligence Committee. So I told you that committee acts as the nodal, intelligence committee acts as the nodal committee for all kinds of intelligence collation. So when I say all kinds of intelligence collation, it includes everything. It could be financial intelligence, etc. So what I'm trying to refer here is, these bodies are concerned with only economic offenses. So if any economic offense happens in the country, or if there is a probability of happening, such information is collected, is processed, and it is also sent to different organs by Financial Intelligence Unit. Financial Intelligence Unit of India, FIUIND, was set up in 2004, and it is the central national agency for receiving, processing, analyzing, and disseminating information related to suspect financial transactions. And who does it give the information to? It reports directly to Economic Intelligence Council, which is headed by the Finance Minister. Now, this structure of intelligence is relevant to, or is specific to a specific sector. Financial intelligence will be having its own unit, and similarly you have a cyber unit also called NTRO that we'll be discussing in cyber security in my next video. So next is, what is, now we have to know what is Economic Intelligence Council, to which Financial Intelligence Unit reports. So Economic Intelligence Council was formed in 1990. It is the apex forum overseeing all government agencies responsible for economic intelligence. So any economic intelligence you have, it has to be given to this particular, or it has to be sent to this particular council. And this council is the apex of all regional economic institutions. At present, there are 30 regional economic intelligence committees at different regions. They are located, and they will be giving the information to this particular body. The chairperson, as far as the composition is concerned, the chairperson of EIC is the Finance Minister of India. It includes certain prominent members. One is, naturally, there will be Governor of RBI, there will be chairperson of SEBI, and there will be three directors of CBI, NCB Narcotics Control Bureau, and Director of Revenue Intelligence. So these are the, and when I'll be giving you a list of all intelligence bodies in India, out of which DRI is also one intelligence body, which will be again reporting to the council only. So intelligence is a part of security. How does it function? How it is play an instrumental role in security? That we'll be discussing, and also I'll be giving you a list of all intelligence units in India, including RAW, etc. Intelligence Bureau, RAW, etc. Next is the final body is Interpol. Interpol is at the international level. Now, Interpol as a body is not just concerned with economic offenses. It will deal with many other offenses. It was meant, basically it is in three things. One is economic crimes, cyber security, and counter-terrorism are the three major criminal activities it acts against. So we'll look at certain history. So naturally, and the nodal body in India for Interpol is CBI, but I have included this in economic offenses precisely because ED has been closely collaborating with Interpol to act against fugitive economic offenders and extradition process, etc. So that is why I've added it here. As far as CBI is concerned, I've done it in detail in my institutional lectures in polity as part of the institution series. There are 3 videos which I did. Now coming to Interpol, what is Interpol? Interpol is nothing but international police at the international level. Originally it was called International Criminal Police Organization. now more commonly, the full form is more commonly known as Interpol, and its headquarters is at Lyon, France. It was formed in 1923, and all UN members are generally members of this, are parties or members of Interpol. There are certain exceptions. I have given the exceptions, just you can look at. So these are UN members, but they are not Interpol members: Micronesia, North Korea, Palau, and Tuvalu. Now, coming to the types of notice given by or issued by Interpol. So I told you Interpol acts against three particular offenses. One is cybersecurity, economic crimes, and terrorism. So when it is acting, there is a method to act as well. It is through notices it does. So when a country becomes a party to Interpol, what is the benefit it is getting? It is getting the benefit of sharing information or getting information from other countries through Interpol. So how does Interpol make it possible? It makes it possible through notices. So when it issues a notice, it has a specific meaning. So there are 8 types of notices. Each type has an independent meaning to it. The most prominent one which has been in news is the red corner notice, issued in the case of Mehul Choksky also, if I'm not wrong. So red corner notice, what does it mean and what other notices are there? Those we'll be discussing in detail, because a standalone question on notices itself is possible in prelims. So what is red corner notice? Red corner notice is a kind of arrest warrant. So a person who has gone fugitive or who has fled the country, in that case, the person will be in that case, red corner notice will be issued. So when a red corner notice is issued, what it basically means is the person should be extradited and he should be arrested and extradited. What is blue notice? Blue notice refers to if you want an extra information or collect additional information on a criminal, in that case blue notice is issued. What is green notice? If a criminal who has committed a crime and is likely to repeat that crime in another country, in that case green notice is issued. What is yellow notice? Yellow notice is issued in cases where you need information on missing persons. Oftentimes it is minors. That is in order to help. This will help in identifying persons who are unable to identify themselves. Next is black notice. Black notice is to identify or to seek information on unidentified bodies. Next is orange notice. Orange notice is when a country wants to publicize about a criminal. So in that case, this particular notice is issued, that is to warn of an event or a person, an object or a process which represents a serious threat to public safety. Next is purple notice. Purple notice is issued when there is a need of an information about a criminal, about his modus operandi, that is how the organization acts, what kind of bombs it uses, what is their method of instilling terror, what is its basic what are their operation methods. In such a case, purple notice is issued. The last one is United Nations Security Council special notice. So here this is issued in case it is issued for those groups and individuals who are targets of UN Security Council Sanctions Committee. If you remember, I very clearly mentioned about this in 1267 resolution in my last video, wherein certain individuals or organizations are designated as terrorists. So when they are designated, and Interpol gets the authority to issue such a notice to get information on them. So these are the methods, or these are the types of notice. And finally, some dots to connect with respect to with respect to earlier videos as well. So CBI I have done. So CBI, there I mentioned that CBI is the nodal body in India which coordinates with Interpol. Second point which you have to remember in economic offences, I've done it earlier. I think I've done it in institutions only when I was doing corruption related institutions. I had mentioned that there is an advisory board for banking frauds established recently. Now this is also concerned with economic offences, so try connecting them with internal security. It was more thematically linked there, so I have put it there, but it is also concerned with internal security. So this is also a new development. It is an advancement in strengthening the economic architecture, or strengthening the security architecture in economy. With this, all the topics are done. Of coming to the final part, that is questions related to the topic. As part of every video, we're giving you questions to practice on. This will help you assess as to how much of the video you've understood. Not only this, it will also help us assess as to how the videos are being received. These questions will be posted in the comment section. Do answer them. It will help us. And also, depending on your responses, we are thinking of a full-fledged current affairs test also very soon, and the date of which will be scheduled once we get the prelims date on May 20th. That's all for this video. There are two questions. One is red corner notice and second is Fugitive Economic Offenders Act. That's all for this video. Thank you. Have a great day.